Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. I got an email from Trevor Stevens. And by the way, he's the one that does these wood carvings. So make sure to check that out. Get 10% off with code CHRISTIAN.HOMESTEAD10. In the subject line, grandson says Jimmy Carter is, quote unquote, coming to the end. In brief update about former president's health. And then Trevor says, hey, Jared, Jimmy Carter update, FYI. So he's sending this to me because he's been watching the channel for a while. There are many of you that are new, and there's this weird thing that we've observed going on with these leaders. Okay, so this all started when President Nelson turned 98 years old. Once he turned 98 years old, if you're counting by years, not like days and months, but just years, that's the birthday where he became the oldest living prophet or apostle of this dispensation. And it made news, and it was very interesting. But I think what made it even more interesting is what happened the day before. You had Queen Elizabeth II, who was the longest reigning British monarch, and also the second longest reigning monarch worldwide, like out of all nations, behind French King Louis XIV. She passed away the day before. And it got me thinking, and some of you thinking, maybe this is a sign. You know, President Nelson, he talks a lot about the second coming. And it's pretty clear that we're in some kind of new phase, especially since 2020. And you also have to think about this. This is the general conference right after his birthday, October 2022 general conference, in a talk called Overcome the World and Find Rest. This is the one where he said, as I've stated before, the gathering of Israel is the most important work taking place on the earth today. One crucial element of this gathering is preparing a people who are able, ready, and worthy to receive the Lord when he comes again. A people who have already chosen Jesus Christ over this fallen world, a people who rejoice in their agency to live the higher, holier laws of Jesus Christ. I call upon you, my dear brothers and sisters, to become this righteous people. So he just flat out calls us to be the people of the second coming. And I have searched high and low. I've never seen anything like this said in any other general conference, okay? So he has this significant birthday, and then he calls on us to be the people of the second coming. So you have this situation where you have these two really notable figures, one that passes away, but then the other one that continues on. There's like a pretty stark contrast when we're looking at like this kind of worldly leader or royalty in the worldly sense, and then the prophet, right? So time went on, and then you guys started sending me emails of these other people. It seemed like there's like this domino effect going on. And what I didn't know is it started earlier that year, or as far as I know right now. Maybe there were some other ones that I missed, but the first one that I have on my radar that's part of this like series of world leaders. Okay, when you think about the book of Daniel, think about the book of Revelation, where one of the main themes is the downfall of nations at the time of the second coming. That this old way of doing things, it's gonna be a thing of the past because Christ is gonna come and he's gonna establish his political kingdom. There's not gonna be nations anymore like we have them now. So first you have Japan. Shinzo Abe was assassinated. He was Japan's longest serving prime minister. Okay. And that's the qualifier. Either you're the longest living or you're the longest in office. And then I also have first and last, and then royalty. Okay. So I have these columns right here. Okay. So he was the longest serving. So this is for Japan. And notice that these are all like powerhouse nations. They're all, nations that at one point or another had a lot of power, a lot of influence. Some of them were superpowers. Some of them were empires. Okay. So Japan, and then following that in August, you had Mikhail Gorbachev, the longest living leader of the Soviet Union. And I don't need to tell you how big a deal the Soviet Union was in the 20th century. And then we had, with the United Kingdom, Queen Elizabeth II. And the United Kingdom has had a lot of influence on the world. That's why you have Indians that speak English. You have Australia and New Zealand that were colonized by them, the United States, Canada. So they were kind of a big deal in world history. And then you have President Nelson, who did not pass away, but he continued on and he's still with us today. Okay, after that, you have China. Jiang Zemin if that's how you pronounce it, longest living president of China and leader of the Chinese Communist Party. Then after that, you have like some smaller things, but you have Abigail Kawanananakoa, the last Hawaiian princess. So it's kind of like not that she really had any power, but like you have this imagery of royalty coming to an end, the end of like dynasties. Does it make sense? The next one I have is for soccer, and you might be like, well, one of these things is not like the others. Well, for some people, sports, entertainment, hobbies are more important to them than nations or religions. So you have Pele, who passed away. His nickname, or he had an unofficial title of the King of Soccer, so he was obviously well known. Okay, but then, and this is one of the weirder ones for me, the longest living pope of all time, Pope Emeritus Benedict the 16th. He passed away on New Year's Eve, which it's so weird that it was that day of all days, because that's the end of the year, right? Well, after that, I'm just going to skip a couple. A couple weeks later, on January 17th, the longest living nun of all time, Lucille Randon, passed away at 118 years old, 340 days. The chances of that happening are very, very unlikely. So these two together would obviously represent the Catholic Church, which has been a powerhouse ever since its inception. For Greece, on January 10th, Constantine II, he was the last king of Greece, and he was actually in exile for most of his life, but it represents the end of a dynasty, an end of a royal family, right? You have the Princess of Rock, Lisa Marie Presley. She passed away in that same month. Tina Turner, the queen of rock and roll. So the only thing that we're missing is Elvis, the king of rock and roll, but he had passed away a long time before this. Then you started having some interesting and notable deaths of like government figures from the United States. So you had Dianne Feinstein. Is that what it is? Feinstein or Feinstein? Yeah, Feinstein, the longest serving woman in U.S. Senate history. So here you have the legislative branch of government. You know, you could say she represents the legislative, potentially. You have Henry Kissinger. Now, he was not a president, prime minister, pope, or king of anything, but he was very, very, very influential. Per the New York Times, the most powerful Secretary of State in the post-World War II era. So I just took note of him, and of course, that falls under the executive branch. And then, after that, and just like notice how it's like 1, 2, 3, just one after another. In December, Sandra Day O'Connor, first woman to serve as a Supreme Court justice, passed away. So now you have the judicial branch. And then, after that, later in the month, December 27th, Jacques Delors, the quote-unquote architect of modern European Union, longest-serving European Commission president. Okay, and then just a couple more. Queen Margaret II. She was the second longest, the longest sitting monarch in Denmark's history. Now, she didn't pass away. She abdicated the throne, but her reign came to an end. This longest reign in Denmark's history came to an end. And then the last and most recent, Italy, with Vittorio Emanuele of Savoy, son of Italy's last king, although he himself had previously declared himself king of Italy. But at this point, if there's any debate over that, it's definitely over now for the kings of Italy, and it had been for a long time. But this is like the last remaining traces of any sort, I guess you could say. So to replicate this, okay, if you're like, oh, it's just all coincidence. Okay, fine, it's coincidence. To replicate something like this, you'd have to have a Soviet Union again. You'd have to have another king or queen of the United Kingdom that reigns longer than Queen Elizabeth II, and that's not likely to happen anytime soon. Definitely not within our lifetimes. And then all the rest of it. There's not going to be another last king of Greece, okay? There's not going to be another Soviet Union. So you understand, some people really struggle with this, but this cannot be replicated. Or if it is, we'd have to have like a Soviet Union too. The monarchy of Italy would have to like come back. It's not going to happen again. And it's all happening within a very narrow window of time. And so now you can see why we're looking at Jimmy Carter, because if this is like some kind of series for people like us that have eyes to see, ears to hear, and we see the writing on the wall, it's like, yep, this is kind of like a foreshadowing. It's like the end of nations. It's the end of churches. It's the end of whatever. And don't get technical. I know that there's going to be there's going to be different religions in the millennium, but like the power of the Catholic Church is not going to be any longer in the millennium. The power, the control, the power, the wealth, it's not going to continue. Okay, so you might think that the end of this series would be the American president. And it just so happens that Jimmy Carter, the person that we're going to be talking about in this video, at age 99, he is both the oldest living former U.S. president and the longest lived president in U.S. history. So he's in good company with all these other people. And he's still alive, but just barely, it seems. What's also interesting about him, you'll notice his birth date. He was born October 1st, 1924. Guess who else was born around that time? President Nelson. In fact, less than a month before, President Nelson was born on September 9th, 1924. Who do you think is going to outlive the others based on this theory? And it is a theory. It's speculation. It's an observation. Don't know if it means anything. We'll have to wait and see. But I don't think that it's too preposterous to think that maybe something is going on here. So I've been waiting for this for a while. Not that I'm wishing any harm at all to Jimmy Carter. I hope he lives as long as possible, that he has a good rest of his life. But let's get into the articles here. So here's an article from USA Today. Jimmy Carter's grandson says he is coming to the end after over a year in hospice care. There's a picture of him and I suppose his wife. They're a good-looking couple there. I'm not saying that I'm like a fan of his politics, but I can compliment them. It's fine. Jason Carter, I better zoom in. Jason Carter, former President Jimmy Carter's grandson, gave an update on his grandfather's health on Tuesday, saying that he's quote-unquote coming to the end. My grandfather is doing okay. He's been in hospice, as you know, for almost a year and a half now. Jason Carter said at the 28th Rosslyn Carter, Georgia Mental Health Forum at the Carter Center. Jimmy Carter, 99, same age as President Nelson, entered hospice care in February 2023. So that caught my attention, obviously, as I was putting together this spreadsheet, because you already had all this going on. Japan, Soviet Union, UK, our church, okay, China, so on and so forth. So after the Pope, Pope Emeritus Benedict, and after the longest living nun, it was after that Jimmy Carter was put into hospice care. And so we were like really wondering about that. It's like, oh my gosh, look at what's going on right now. Now, and really quick, what happens after this? I don't know. But it'll like complete this set. You know, maybe not all nations are represented here, but a lot of the most important and powerful nations and organizations are represented here. What happens when it's done? And is it done with Jimmy Carter? I don't know. I also want to point out, and we talked about this recently, we have Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu is the longest serving prime minister in Israel's history, having served a total of over 16 years. He is the first prime minister to have been born in Israel after its establishment. So this is maybe another one to look at, you know. Jimmy Carter with the United States, Netanyahu with Israel. Don't know. But the fact is that you have these two nations that remain. Okay, so the Carter Center announced last year that the former president would not receive quote unquote additional medical intervention. There's also this like other just kind of interesting detail. Rosalind Carter died last year at age 96. That's his wife. And they'd been married for 77 years. I feel like I've been seeing so many 77s lately and sevens. Like, I don't know. I'm just going to point that out. That's it. Okay. And then to finish this up, there is another article. There's a couple articles. This one's from The Hill. Carter Center CEO says, quote, no significant change, end quote, in Jimmy Carter's condition, AJC. Okay, so maybe she's kind of correcting whatever the grandson said. Carter Center CEO Paige Alexander said, yeah, as I start reading it, just go ahead, just disappear. It's fine. Here we go. Thank you very much. Carter Center CEO Paige Alexander said in a Wednesday interview that there has been, quote unquote, no significant change in former President Carter's condition. Quote, it's 15 months of hospice at this point, and he is fully retired, Alexander said on the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's Politically Georgia podcast Wednesday. Continuing, there really hasn't been a significant change. I mean, he will always be one bad cold away from the end. He is in hospice care, and there are palliative measures if he's in pain, but nothing else, end quote. Carter announced in February 2023 that he was entering hospice care, foregoing further medical intervention so he could spend time with family. At 99 years old, Carter is the oldest living U.S. president. Alexander's comments follow earlier remarks from Jason Carter, the former president's oldest grandson, and the chair of the Carter Center Board of Trustees at an annual mental health forum at the center Tuesday. Quote, my grandfather is doing okay. He has been in hospice, as you know, for almost a year and a half now, and he really is, I think, coming to the end, Jason Carter said at the event. And then he continues, I said, Papa, I can't. People ask me how you're doing, and I say, I don't know. And he just said, well, I don't know myself. Okay, so according to Paige Alexander, there hasn't been like any probably measurable change or substantial change. However, his grandson, which, I mean, you can get a sense, and that's probably what he's feeling. His grandson feels like it is coming to an end. So we'll just have to wait and see. And then once it does, I don't know what happens after that. The eclipse on April 8th, it came and went. I think it was extremely significant. I just think that we just have to wait and see. But I just think that we keep getting to the end of like these different like series of things. And this is one of them. And we would do well to pay attention to it. It doesn't matter if the second coming doesn't happen for a couple of years. Like, it's not coincidence. It's not just random that all these people are dying within this short amount of time, within this like short window of time. It's very weird. It's very bizarre. And like I said, it'd be very, very, very difficult to replicate. I don't know how many hundreds or maybe even thousands of years you'd have to wait to do this again. That's all I'm saying. Okay, well, that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.